On the 11th of June 2026, the World Cup officially began. More than 83,000 fans packed the stands in Mexico City. Music echoed throughout the stadium. Fireworks lit up the night sky. Millions of people around the world turned their attention to the venue where the dream of the World Cup was becoming reality once again. It was the kind of moment every football fan hopes to witness in person. One of those fans was Gibril Gueye, an ordinary supporter from Senegal. He had waited years for this tournament. He followed every qualifying match. He imagined the moment he would stand among thousands of fellow supporters, wearing the colors of his national team and singing the Senegalese national anthem at the World Cup. But that moment never came. While tens of thousands celebrated inside the stadium, Gibril could only watch from a screen thousands of miles away. Not because Senegal had been eliminated. Not because he lacked passion. And not because he did not want to be there. But because he was not allowed to be there. Take a moment and put yourself in Gibril's position. If your national team qualified for the World Cup, but you were prevented from entering the stadium to support them, how would you feel? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because Gibril's story is not an isolated case. And when we look deeper, it becomes clear that this is not just the story of one Senegalese fan. It is the story of millions of people around the world who have found themselves standing outside the biggest football celebration on the planet. What makes Gibril's story remarkable is not that he was the only person affected. It is that he is just one of millions facing the same reality. The World Cup has always been promoted as a celebration for the entire world. A tournament where every nation has a chance to be represented. A stage where football rises above borders, politics, and the differences that separate people. But the 2026 World Cup is creating a contradiction unlike anything seen before. While FIFA continues to repeat its slogan, "Football unites the world," millions of supporters are finding themselves unable to travel and support their national teams in person. Under regulations introduced before the tournament, citizens from dozens of countries face travel bans or strict restrictions when attempting to enter the United States. That means countless fans, despite having the passion, the financial means to buy tickets, and the desire to attend the World Cup, may still be unable to reach the stadium. Think about that for a moment. A tournament called the World Cup. Yet not everyone in the world has the opportunity to be part of it. An event built on the idea of bringing people together. Yet millions of people are being left outside the gate. And the deeper you look into the issue, the clearer it becomes that this is no longer just Gibril's story. It is the story of supporters from Haiti, Iran, Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, and many other nations. People who waited years for the World Cup, only to discover that their dream might come to an end before the journey has even begun. To fully understand the meaning behind this story, we need to return to Gibril Gueye. Because Gibril is not a politician. He does not represent any organization. He is simply an ordinary football fan. Just like millions of others around the world, for years, he followed Senegal through the earliest qualifying matches. He experienced the victories, the disappointments, and the moments that gave an entire nation hope. When Senegal officially secured its place at the 2026 World Cup, Gibril began dreaming about something every supporter hopes to experience. Being in the stands, watching his national team with his own eyes, standing among thousands of fans wearing Senegal's colors and singing the national anthem before kickoff. This was never just a vacation. It was the kind of memory many people spend a lifetime waiting for. But Gibril soon realized that the challenge was not the cost of airfare or match tickets. The real question was whether he would be allowed to get there at all. And before long, it became clear that he was far from alone. Alongside Gibril were supporters from Haiti, Iran, Côte d'Ivoire, and many other nations. People who had followed their teams for years. People who celebrated when their countries qualified for the World Cup. People who believed that 2026 would finally give them the chance to experience the biggest football tournament on earth in person. Yet instead of packing their bags for a once-in-a-lifetime journey, many found themselves doing something very different. Watching the news. Waiting for answers. hoping that circumstances beyond their control might somehow change. That is why Djibril is no longer just an individual fan. He has become a symbol of millions of supporters who feel left behind. People who are not asking for special treatment. People who are not demanding privileges. They are simply asking for the opportunity to do the most basic thing in football: to stand in the crowd and support the team they love. The question is, what put millions of football fans in this position? The answer begins with a series of decisions introduced before the 2026 World Cup. In June 2025, the United States government signed an executive order restricting entry for citizens from multiple countries. 6 months later, the list was expanded even further. When the new regulations officially took effect at the beginning of 2026, a total of 39 countries were affected by travel bans or strict visa restrictions. 39 countries. Nearly 20% of all nations in the world. This was no longer a small group of supporters. It was a population measured in the millions. What made the situation even more striking was that several of the affected countries had earned their place at the World Cup through their performances on the field. Haiti, Iran, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal. Their players were still allowed to compete. Their flags still appeared inside the stadiums. Their national anthems still echoed before kickoff. But many of their supporters could not be there to witness those moments in person. For Haiti, this was an emotional return to the World Cup after years of crisis and instability. For Senegal, it could be the final World Cup appearance for a golden generation of players. For Iran and Côte d'Ivoire, it was another opportunity to prove themselves on the biggest stage in world football. Yet, for countless supporters, every one of those moments would exist only through a screen. The distance separating them from the stadium was not measured in miles. It was measured by a door they could not walk through. And from that point forward, the story stopped being just about visas or immigration procedures. It became something much larger. A debate about what the World Cup is supposed to represent. Can a tournament called the World Cup still hold its original meaning when millions of supporters have no realistic opportunity to be there? Or is this the first time in modern football history that the sport is being forced to confront its most difficult question about what it truly means to be global? This story is no longer just about Djibril Gueye or the supporters of Senegal. It is no longer simply a story about visas or immigration procedures. Because the World Cup has never been only about what happens on the pitch. For decades, FIFA has presented the World Cup as a celebration of the entire world, an event where nations, cultures, and supporters from every corner of the globe can come together through a shared passion for football. That is why the slogan, "Football unites the world," has become so familiar to millions of people. But the 2026 World Cup is raising a difficult question. How can football unite the world when millions of people have no opportunity to be present? Teams such as Senegal, Haiti, Iran, and Côte d'Ivoire have done everything required of them. They survived the qualification process. They earned their place at the World Cup through their performances on the field. Yet for many of their supporters, the journey ends before it ever begins. And that is the moment when this story moves beyond sport. It becomes a debate about fairness and responsibility. Can a tournament truly represent the entire world if part of that world cannot take part? Do messages about unity still carry the same meaning when reality creates invisible barriers between people who share the same love for football? These are questions that more and more people are beginning to ask, not only of the host nation, but also of FIFA, an organization that has long insisted that football belongs to everyone. As the controversy surrounding the 2026 World Cup continues to grow, what has captured the attention of many people is not only the travel restrictions themselves, it is also how football organizations have responded to the situation. On one side is FIFA, an organization that frequently speaks about unity, inclusion, and the global nature of football. Yet when questions emerged about millions of supporters being unable to attend the World Cup, FIFA's response was relatively limited. This became especially noticeable in the case of Somali referee Omar Artan, who was reportedly held for several hours at Miami International Airport before being denied entry into the United States. FIFA issued a brief statement. "We are not involved in the host country's immigration procedures." Technically, that may be true, but for many supporters, the statement did little to address the larger concern. Meanwhile, UEFA took a very different approach. Just days after the incident, the organization announced Omar Artan as the referee for the UEFA Super Cup. It was not the World Cup, but it was a concrete action, a way of demonstrating that his abilities and contributions were still recognized. That is where many people see the difference. One organization explained why it could not act. The other looked for a way to act. And that contrast has only intensified the debate. Because people do not always judge institutions by what they say. They often judge them by what they do when one of their own faces a difficult moment. And in this story, many observers believe UEFA delivered a clearer message through its actions than any press conference could have delivered through words. As the 2026 World Cup unfolds, the matches continue. Goals are scored. Stadiums remain filled with passion and emotion. But for millions of supporters around the world, there is one feeling that is difficult to ignore. The feeling of being left outside the game. From Haiti to Senegal, from Iran to many other nations, countless fans have been forced to follow their teams through a screen instead of from the stands. Among them is Djibril Gueye, a man who waited years for the World Cup, only to watch his dream from a distance. And he is far from alone. Behind every empty seat is a story that may never be told. Behind every unused ticket is a supporter who hoped to be part of the greatest celebration in world football. Perhaps the saddest part is not that they were unable to enter the stadium. It is the feeling that their love for the game was not enough to open that door. For many fans, the World Cup is more than a tournament. It is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. And when that opportunity disappears, what remains is not anger alone. It is disappointment. The disappointment of watching a dream come true for the world, while knowing that you were never given the chance to be part of it. The 2026 World Cup will eventually crown a champion. The greatest goals will be remembered. Historic moments will be replayed and discussed for years to come. But beyond everything that happens on the pitch, one question still remains unanswered. Can a tournament truly represent the entire world when millions of football supporters have no opportunity to be there? You may agree with the security policies. You may believe the restrictions are necessary. Or you may feel that the World Cup should remain accessible to all eligible supporters who wish to attend. Whatever your perspective may be, this story highlights how the gap between a slogan and reality can sometimes be larger than we expect. So what do you think? Has FIFA done enough to protect the spirit of football unites the world? Or will the 2026 World Cup be remembered as the tournament where part of the world was left behind? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every comment, and I would genuinely like to hear your perspective on this story. Because in the end, the future of the World Cup is not only shaped by the players on the field, it is also shaped by the voices of the supporters who care deeply about what the tournament is meant to represent.